Today's gospel gives us an idea how Jesus saved people who have been bullied from turning into bullies themselves. You know that bullying has become a very common phenomenon in our society nowadays. And I think we need the help or a little help from psychologists, perhaps even from psychiatrists, to get to understand professionally how people can carry with them their experiences of being bullied all the way to their old age. How the trauma, if it is not properly addressed, could later be translated in the way victims conduct themselves when they turn into adults, especially when they find themselves in positions of power or authority, like as parents or as teachers, as managers, as administrators, or even pastors, or as government leaders. How the once bullied kids could eventually turn into bullies themselves if nobody ever helped them deal with their suppressed feelings of anger and resentment, or even the desire to get even with their former abusers. I have heard many stories from parents who learned only later that their children had actually been bullied in school. Apparently, the most common tendency kasi is for children to just keep quiet about it, because they're afraid that their parents might overreact and just make matters worse. The parents gradually notice something different in their children's behavior, as well as in their performance in school. Like, for example, they observe that they are becoming more insecure, more lacking in self-confidence. Yung ibang parents, they do not realize how deeply their children can get affected by a constant bombardment of comments, mga tipong comments from bullies like pangit, bobo, bakla, lampa, baduy. Oh, ulit-ulitin lang ang mga ito. The frequency of being ridiculed would actually make the person begin to think of himself as really ugly, stupid, weakling, clumsy, tacky, etc. They begin to feel na para bang ang lit-lit ng pagkatao nila, na para bang wala silang kwentang tao. They can carry this all the way to adulthood without realizing it. There are actually signs, that parents may miss out, especially kung masyadong busy ang parents. They may not notice that their children are seriously trying to do some physical workout, nagba-bodybuilding na walang hinto, enrolling in courses for karate, or other forms of self-defense, or even engaging in dangerous sports like gun shooting because of the desire for revenge, gustong maghiganti. In some instances, because they can no longer get even with those who had bullied them, they inflict their revenge on other people. People who are younger, smaller, more helpless, less mature than they are. And then, the vicious cycle begins. Yung dating ina-abuse, nagiging abuser. Have we not heard of many cases of mass killings in many states in the United States? They are perpetrated by formerly abused people who at some point just snap and they become homicidal when their sense of power is reinforced especially by deadly weapons. Lalo na sa Amerika, napakadaling bumili ng mga baril. In Filipino, we often describe them as malalim ang hugot. May bit-bit na mga hinanakit sa mga panlalait na pinaggagawa sa kanila. They never quite get over a kind of inner urge for revenge. Parang paulit-ulit sa subconscious na gustong sabihin, maghintay ka lang, darating din ang panahon mo. Before long, they inflict evil on others. Hindi naman dahil masama silang tao. They're not evil. But because they've never been able to process the traumatic experience of abuse that they had been through in the past. Alam nyo, itong si Zacchaeus is something like a prototype of that kind of personality. St. Luke tells us he was a chief tax collector and a very wealthy man. But he also notes that this man was maliit, small in stature. I suspect that this man had been bullied for being vertically challenged, ika nga, in politically correct language, and had literally climbed the way to the top in the social ladder by becoming a corrupt tax collector, precisely to get even with the people who belittled him. Siguro inisip niya that the best way para siya lumaki sa paningin ng tao is by aspiring to be rich, influential, and powerful. Matagal na siyang, being looked down upon. And he wanted to see the time when people naman would look up at him in spite of his physical limitations. Sabi ni St. Luke, Zacchaeus longed to see what Jesus was like. Maybe, marami na siyang narinig about Jesus. Maybe he wanted to know how come itong son of a carpenter na ito, a virtual nobody in Jewish society, bakit siya ang taas-taas ng tingin ng tao sa kanya? And since Zacchaeus was quite the opposite, gusto niyang malaman, ano ba yung secret para tingalain ka? And so he did what he was used to doing, climbing his way to the top. And that created the occasion for his encounter with Jesus that would profoundly change him as a person for good. How? Well, Jesus looked up at him. Jesus invited him to come down. And Jesus had dinner with him. For the first time, Zacchaeus felt like someone finally looked up at him. He was more used to being looked down upon, like I've said already. And of all people, ang unang tumingala sa kanya ay yung taong kinabibiliban niya. The man who was regarded highly by people. And then, of course, Jesus would invite him to come down. It was then that Zacchaeus finally realized, hindi na niya kailangang mag-aakyat in order to see Jesus or to be noticed by him. He did not even need to prove himself or to prove his self-worth. One look from Jesus. I call the look of Jesus the look of love. The look of love that says, come down. You are valuable in the eyes of God. You are loved as you are. You see, for as long as people try too hard to prove themselves, well, that can only mean they are still insecure. It's as if they have to put down others to raise themselves up. In the sight of God, It is those who humble themselves who are exalted. Finally, Jesus had dinner with him, meaning Jesus accepted him as he was. He did not think of what people would say against him if he was to be seen in the company of people like Zacchaeus. Ni wala siyang sinet na condition. Hindi niya sinabing, I will only have fellowship with you kung magbago ka muna. No, baliktad. He had fellowship with him, and that brought about a change. The change followed after the experience of love and acceptance. It made a totally new person out of him. Dear brothers and sisters, ang daming mga Zacchaeus dito sa mundo, they're not bad people. They might just be dealing with issues that have kept them in a state of perpetual victimhood. They might be the type who will not know how to handle power or authority or responsibility because they try too hard to prove themselves. Well, their sense of victimhood remains fresh even decades later. Sometimes they become a splitting image of their oppressors. Well, maraming ganyan sa ating lipunan. You know, people who instead of accepting criticism, become very defensive. They take offense easily. They think they are being ridiculed all over again. They will try to destroy those who criticize them. They will call them names, badmouth, or even accuse them of being hypocrites. They will do anything to put down anyone who says anything negative against them. Yun ang nakakatakot with the Zacchaeus syndrome if they have not experienced at all that look of love, which is the only thing that could heal them of the Zacchaeus syndrome. Well, I'd like to end by proposing that you reflect on that charismatic song in Tagalog that says, I think it summarizes the grace experience of Zacchaeus after his encounter with Jesus. Sabi nung kanta, nang tanggapin ko si Jesus, aking Diyos, nagbago ang lahat sa buhay ko. Bagong ligayang nadarama, bagong pag-asa ang nakikita. Lahat ay aking ibibigay pati aking buhay upang purihin siya.
Nang tanggapin ko si Jesus, aking Diyos, nagbago ang lahat sa buhay ko. Bagong ligaya ang nadarama, bagong pag-asa ang nakikita. Lahat ay aking ibibigay pati aking buhay, pangpurihin siya. Lahat ay aking ibibigay pati aking